So welcome to the office and studio of Jitendra Mistry, which is also the site and home to the exhibition The Happiness of Architecture. Jitendra Mistry had imagined and planned this exhibition himself. It was to be opened on 21st of March 2020 when the pandemic suddenly hit, and in a few months we also lost Jitendra Mistry to the pandemic. The research process to write a book on Jitendra Mistry had already started. And in a chance conversation with Amrita Somaya, I realized that there was this exhibition planned by him. So as a part of my research process, I decided to revive this exhibition and replay it, redo it with the intentions of Jitendra Mistry, but also now inserting a curatorial intent into this exhibition. Jitendra Mistry has had a very curious and a very interesting practice. He began as a modernist and over a period of time developed a keen and a deep interest in traditional and regional architecture, something that he really pursued with great passion and with a lot of hard work. And I think this journey has been intriguing, and it is something that we want to discover or we want to explore in this exhibition. For him, it is not a binary to be a modernist or a traditionalist, but for him, all of it is a continuation in the pursuit of beauty. All of it is a continuation in understanding aesthetics. And I think that is the approach that I have taken as a key curatorial idea to look at this exhibition, and through this exhibition explore his work. This exhibition is a memorial and an exploration to the life and work of Jitendra Mistry. The Happiness of Architecture was a title that we imagined for this exhibition, because every time I heard stories about how Jitendra Mistry worked on site, in the workshop, in his studio, there was always that element that he was very joyous as long as he was around architecture, as long as he was around designed objects, he was in his workshop. And I think this element of joy or this element of happiness is something that was very important to understand and explore as to how design objects, whether it is an artisan or whether it's an architect, bring a sense of joy to life and also celebrate life in certain ways. So in fact, we begin the exhibition with a sculpture that was designed by Jitendra Mistry. He designed this as a welcome sculpture for the exhibition that he had imagined, and in fact it is an assembly or it is an assemblage of the different elements from the workshop. So one key element to understand about Jitendra Mistry's studio, that it was a studio combined with a workshop. Now, coming from a very early Bauhaus tradition, he worked with Walter Gropius at some point. And I think that idea that a studio and a workshop, the space of design and the space of making on the drawing board or making in the working bench of an artisan, are both interrelated projects. And which is why what you see in this sculpture, in this assembly sculpture, in this installation, is actually the different elements of a column taken out of a traditional building and assembled and deassembled here. He was very excited about how traditional architecture always works on a key of parts, and when you dismantle the key of parts, you really understand what has been the driving force of traditional architecture. When you walk further, you come across a second installation. There are two installations which are actually dioramas, and when I earlier heard about this exhibition, the most interesting thing were these dioramas. The dioramas really come from a 19th century imagination of architecture, where very often in expositions like the Crystal Palace or the Chicago Exposition, these kind of dioramas from different parts of the world would be brought and assembled to expose to audiences the different kinds of architecture and design that happens all across the world. And it's interesting that he had decided to do two dioramas. The diorama of the Koteshwar Haveli, which is one of the very early examples where he actually salvages or brings home an old heritage structure and rebuilds it and reconstructs it for a new piece of architecture, for a new building. And that's why we begin with this diorama that is in the landscape, in the garden of his studio and workshop. So after these two welcome elements, these two assemblages in the garden, we move into the studio space where we've actually converted the studio space into an exhibition space. So it doubles as a space of work and a space of exposition. In this small entrance room, we actually begin by small glimpses into the life and work of Jitendra Mistry, where you see him with his wife and lifelong working partner Mamta Mistry. You also see him receiving an award or working with a very important client of a very, very important project, which also developed into a friendship, which is with Shriji of Udaipur. This space also sort of tells you about the key events, the key moments which shapes Under a Mango Tree to begin with and later becomes Studio 3. The very early days when he realized that if he had an interest in traditional architecture, he had to work very closely with artisans. And the collaboration was not about collaborating project by project, but the collaboration was about setting up the workshop himself. And which is why the workshop and the team of artisans are very, very important in his working process. In this room and the next, we really explore the two twin facets of Jitendra Mistry. Jitendra Mistry the designer and Jitendra Mistry the collector. The workshop, the idea of collecting and the idea of designing were actually a trio, a simultaneous persuasion which helped him develop the process that he was working with. Collecting, whether he was collecting old heritage architecture structures or he was collecting works of art, and he really did not distinguish between a modern work of art or a pre-modern work of art. He collected objects, whether they were textiles, whether they were works of art, whether that was furniture, as a constant way of developing what I would call a library of design ideas, a library of aesthetic questions. And literally what you see here is you see some of his early drawings. And I think this working with the hand is very, very important in his life, as it would have been for his generation. But I think the way he had an interest in workshop artisans and the way you see some of his early rendered drawings, there is a huge investment in the question of working with the hand. And simultaneously you see pieces of furniture also. So you may see a tracing where he's exploring the idea of ornamentation that is to be used for a door. Here you see him sort of designing a very early cinema theatre which could have been the precursor to the multiplexes of today. But also you see these pieces of furniture, some of them collected, salvaged, repaired, while some of them are designed as fresh pieces based on the designs of some things that he collected. So studying some of the collected pieces, he would develop newer designs, but using the same questions of aesthetics, using the same questions of materiality, ornamentation, etc. So it's interesting to see a Corbusier image and to see a painted piece of furniture or a detailed ornamentation study for a door coming simultaneously in an office or in a library. As we move into this space, we explore that further, and we explore that more precisely with the second diorama. And this again to recall this very interesting way that he decided to display some of his works, recalling the 19th century diorama, where the Udaipur palace restoration work, rebuilding work and transformation of the Udaipur palace into a hotel was a very, very important project for him. And I think that was a project that also brought him at the interface of what is contemporary and what is traditional, and how do you blend the questions of contemporary and the history. So simultaneously here, two other important pieces are from his collection, the Pichwai, where this was a classic way in which a plan of a city, a plan of a building, a plan of a neighborhood would be drawn in a very different technique from the Western perspective technique. But at the same time, right across the room, you have one of India's finest artists and his work, which is Bhupen Khakkar. And one would be able to see how this is a unique work that we get from the artist Bhupen Khakkar. The sense of the tablecloth and the folded clothes, and the sense of a landscape that is sort of far behind. Simultaneous to this, you see a drawing like this. You see a drawing of the Karnavati hotel that he did, and how sort of drawing a reflection would sort of be as important to drawing the main building. So in a curious and a clear way, you see this engagement with different mediums, whether it is the medium of the diorama, whether it is the medium of painting a pitchway, whether it is the medium of a modern artist, whether it is the medium of drawing architecture, whether it is the medium of measure drawings like this extract that we have from the Eklingji measure drawings, or he would go around collecting pieces like this, which is a curious assemblage of a religious tableau, but a religious tableau that is sort of developed in the contemporary, sitting right in front. This is how it has existed in his office. This was not shaped for the exhibition. It sits right in front of another very modernist abstract painting. So in this room, one has tried to sort of showcase the melange that you find in his library, the melange that you find in his archives, while simultaneously we've also sort of tried to focus, at least with one project, with the Udaipur project, a detailed investment. If you see the before and after projects of photographs of Udaipur, you realize the kind of hard work that must have gone in taking a traditional building that was in shambles, that was broken down or demolished in many ways, and had to be resurrected for a contemporary program, but keeping the traditional aesthetics in place. And from here, if you sort of peep into his office, which is what the exhibition does, it allows you to look into his office for simply 2 or 3 reasons. You get to see his library, and I think it's fascinating if you get a sense of start looking out. So you will find Victor Horta, but you will find Manu Parekh, and you will find detailed books on Bombay and Ahmedabad. So you see his interest, the way he sort of developed a library for his interest, where questions of ornamentation, materiality, metal work were simultaneously with his interest in the city. And in that sense, you also have very interesting collections of old photographs or old drawings of cities like Surat and Ahmedabad. This studio building designed by Jitendra Mistry is as much as a part of the exhibition as much as it houses the exhibition. I believe these were storerooms that he opened up to get his studio and design team working here. And at any point in time when you're in this studio, you're in touch with the landscape, you're in touch with the garden. The sense of the garden between a studio and a workshop, I find it an interesting concept. The garden has always been, whether it's a private garden or a public garden, it has always been a place of pleasure, but also a place of people coming together. And to have this landscape and nature within which your studio sits is something that contributes very interestingly to the process of thinking, and also to the process of understanding how design and human or design and nature come together. Literally, the next room that you see in this studio actually is where the workshop and the studio come together. The design process and the hand process, the mind process actually come together. You not only see pieces of finished furniture here, but right across you see the Siddhi Sayyad Jali door, a classic piece from Ahmedabad that was used by him to actually design a door. You see other pieces of furniture, whether it's a chair, but you also see items that were collected by him. A small model of the Siddhi Sayyad Jali or a similar arch that he would collect, or a piece from the workshop that was brought in here. Or when you come here, you not only see the different ways in which the craftsman works, the craftspeople work in the workshop, what it involves, the sort of the bodily engagement of the craftsman, and at the same time a series of sketches that he would develop, a diary of sketches which were used as a working process. So the working process is simultaneously exhibited with the finished pieces of design, and this relationship between what you get as a product and what is the process, and literally, as I keep repeating, the bodily process in which the whole body of the architect or the designer is involved in the production, is something that has been fascinating and something that one has tried to bring about in this exhibition. Yes, sir. So we walked down this path through the garden, as I keep saying, the garden of plants, but also the garden of ideas, that literally connects the space of the studio and the space of the workshop which we are entering. And as we walk down, you see a facade from an old salvaged building there, you see another facade from a heritage building here, and these objects literally occupy the landscape. So like the dioramas, these constructed and repaired objects also occupy the landscape, much in the sense of the picturesque. The picturesque where historical objects were planted in a garden for pleasure. Here they sort of combine the notion of exhibition, the notion of thinking, the notion of recovering objects, and that's what makes this garden interesting, including the sort of the Chandarbo that you see above, again one of the collected objects of Jitendra Mistry. But this coming at the crossroads, in that direction you have the yard which we will visit, here you have the workshop, there you have the studio, and at this crossroads the Chandarbo, which actually creates a temporary ritual space. You see it sort of hanging above your head, connecting these three important aspects of the studio and Jitendra Mistry's practice. So let's move into the workshop and see how it became a part of his design process. In my understanding, the studio was connected to the workshop in two very important ways. This workshop is a karkhana, the space of work where hands, feet, eyes, body, your entire physical self is involved in making objects, opening up objects, understanding their design, remaking new design. But at the same time, what you realize in this workshop, it had a twin function. It was also the space of collection. And as I say, it was the encyclopedia and the dictionary of Jitendra Mistry, because many architectural collected objects or large pieces of furniture that he went scouting around, literally like a flaneur of the city, went around places collecting these objects and bringing these objects inside these workshops, where, as I keep saying, they become the encyclopedia and the dictionary to develop new ideas in design and to understand this relationship between the object of design, the purpose of making, and the purpose of design in human life in that sense. Once you go inside, the sense of what I have been speaking as to what it means to be within collected objects, within designed objects, between half broken objects, between farmas, it's very sort of brings the question of design alive. And I think one has not realized what it has meant historically, whether it's the Renaissance studio, whether it's the Mughal atelier, where all these spaces always had the space of making and the space of designing connected. And when you're inside these workshops, when you're between sort of doors or grills or metal pieces or workmen working or unfinished pieces and finished pieces and drawings, you really get a sense as to how the question of a physical or a bodily engagement with design influences the design process very differently than thinking of design through the space of a studio, through the space of a drawing board. So this combination is something that is very important, one should pay attention to. So as you will realize in this workshop, it's very interesting, you keep landing up on these kind of collected objects. At the same time, there are many templates of design developed or produced. You see woodwork happening in one corner, you see kind of silver plate work happening in another corner, you see metal work happening in another corner. And this engagement with objects, a workshop is also a museum, and I think we've never really realized that this notion of what a museum does to design and what a workshop does to design is an area that one can actually explore and think about. And in this very preliminary research that I've done on Jitendra Mistry, it's really sort of opened up my mind to the question of understanding the space of work, the workshop. The final place where this exhibition comes to a closure is actually this yard that you see. I call it the yard, but I also call it the exposition. It was also very crucial in the way Jitendra Mistry had imagined the original exhibition, where he wanted to display a variety of some of his important furniture design pieces. And here the design process is making new but making new involves a study of the old, involves repair, involves rebuilding, and I think the range that you see here becomes very, very important. And again, like the diorama, this space and this design was very interesting for me, because somewhere he takes design back to the early 19th century imagination, where the notion of trade, the business of design, the work of design, the craftsmanship of design, they all come together in the exposition, they all come together in the yard. So as much as a question of aesthetics, but the tools of the trade, the tools of business, the tools of market, the tools of workshop, they literally come in this kind of an exposition model, in which these pieces of furniture are displayed, but they are also displayed again amidst the facades that are sort of salvaged, recovered facades that are actually waiting to go back into certain new projects. In fact, some of these are already designated to certain new projects, which within 3 months these facades will move and go there. So the yard as a space of changing pieces of furniture all the time is something that is very interesting, and the exhibition in that sense closes where these key elements or key ideas of business, beauty and work come together.